Namaste. You know, I get so much bliss from doing these recordings. And what am I trying to do? I'm trying to explain Brahman according to the scriptures. But Brahman is inexplicable. Says so right in Māṇḍukya Upaniṣad, verse 7. So what am I doing? I'm trying to get you to look. Because once you understand what Brahman is, then you look for it, you will find it. Why? Because you are Brahman. Tvam aham brahmasmī. See, every living creature is Brahman. Actually, everything is Brahman. Sarva kalvidang Brahma. But we don't see it because, why? We identify with form, name and form. And because of this, the blinding glare of the creation blinds us to the existence of the self. But, without the self, there's nothing. So we have to turn our attention away from the world and back towards the self. And the best way to do that is in dreams. So this whole chapter is about dreams and deep sleep. And there's a surprising amount to know about it, a surprising amount to say about it and understand. People generally, because of social conditioning, I guess, and linguistic convention and so on, kind of put down dreams as if they're not important. Oh, it was just a dream. Oh, it was just a thought. Oh, I was just daydreaming. But if we look at the history of human innovation and invention, most of the great advances that give us unparalleled quality of life have come from just that kind of daydreaming. Wouldn't it be nice if we could have a horseless carriage run by steam? Wouldn't it be nice if we could have a heavier than air aircraft that could fly anywhere? Somebody had to dream this up, literally, and then step by step turn it into a reality. Every creative artist goes through this all the time. You get an idea, which is just a thought, indistinguishable from a dream, and then you want to bring it into some kind of form, some kind of reality in Jagrat consciousness. This is what an artist does. This is also what a scientist does. And it should be also what a meditator or a sadhu does. Brings these dreams, these thoughts about Brahman and about the nature of reality into some kind of concrete form that exists in the world and can be shared with others. So the scriptures are like that. The scriptures are somebody's thoughts, somebody's dreams, somebody's realizations of what is really going on, brought into the form of literature. And these ancient literatures of the Puranas, the Itihasas, the Upanishads, the Brahmanas, the Vedas, they are all originating from the same creative source, dreams. So let's go further into this deep description of what dreams are all about and how they can reveal Brahman. Text 14. Everybody sees his sport, but nobody sees him. They say, do not wake him up suddenly. If he does not find the right organ, the body becomes difficult to doctor. Others, however, say that the dream state of a man is nothing but the waking state because he sees in dreams only those things that he sees in the waking state. This is wrong. In the dream state, the man himself becomes the light. I give you 1,000 cows, sir. Please instruct me further about liberation. So this is Yajnavalkya speaking in the beginning of the verse, continuing to describe the state of dreaming and how the self illumines the dream world. The dream world is different from the waking world. As we all have experienced, crazy things can happen in dreams that would never happen in Jagrat, in physical reality. So, to understand how this is possible, we have to look deeper into the dream state and how it operates. Here's Śaṅkarācārya's commentary on this verse. Everybody sees his sport, consisting of the impressions of villages, cities, women, eatables, etc., conjured by the self. But nobody sees him. What a pity that although the self is totally distinct from the body and organs and is present before their very eyes, people are yet unfortunate enough not to see it, notwithstanding its capacity of being seen. This is how the Shruti is sympathizing with mankind. The idea is that in dreams, the self becomes altogether distinct and is itself the light. So in Jagrat consciousness, it's very difficult to discern the self because there are so many lights. The sun, the moon, electric lights, and so on. Fire, words even. Remember back in the beginning of the chapter? What is a light for a man? It can be words, it can be thoughts. Thoughts are dreams. And finally, it is the self, Brahman, that is the light for a man, because that light always shines. Every other kind of light is temporary and subject to conditioning. Therefore, in the end, they're unreliable. The sun and moon can set, go beyond the horizon, and they're useless. Words can be wrong or not heard or not understood. And memory and so on, all these things can fail, but the self never fails. The self is unconditioned. That means no circumstances can affect it. No other causes can change it or alter its light. It is not subject to be the effect of any other cause, but it itself is the cause of everything. Why is that? Because without the fundamental awareness, the objectless, unconditioned awareness of the self as the substrate of consciousness, we wouldn't be conscious of anything. So if we are conscious, you are conscious, aren't you? Yes, okay. Anyone who is conscious can easily discern the self because the self is the center or the substrate of consciousness. As long as we're conscious, we are the self. So this goes on then to say that the various things that we create in dreams are visible to us, but we aren't visible. Remember your dreams, or try to cultivate lucid dreaming, where you can enter into your dreams in a conscious state. And you'll see that when you let go of the body, when you let go of the senses, when you enter into the mind alone, there's light. There's this illumination that pervades everything. And all the objects perceived in the dream are illuminated but the source of illumination is not seen. That's because the source is the self. And we are the self. The self cannot see itself. But others can see the self in the sense of its activities, its qualities. For example, life. Anytime we see life in any form, the self is there, the consciousness is there, the mind, activity, the life airs, everything is there, both subtle and gross, by the grace of the self. So in dreams, there is no other light because the senses are dormant. The eyes, the ears, and the other senses are disconnected. We're not getting any input from those. That's the nature of sleep. So in other words, there is Svapna consciousness during waking consciousness that we call thinking. And there's Svapna consciousness when we are asleep, which is called dreaming. In either case, the principle is the same. Have you ever read a good book and found yourself daydreaming about the characters or the scenes or the action described in the book? That's Svapna. And it's the same principle when we're asleep. We are creating these visions of villages, towns, people, all kinds of things, all kinds of actions happening. Although it is true, the things that we conceive of in dreams are things that we have already experienced in waking. The only difference is in dreams, like I said, anything can happen. You can transmigrate from one scene to another just in the blink of an eye. Everything can change. And in dreams, we simply accept it like it's normal, isn't it? We don't freak out, It's like, oh, the whole world dissolves and turns into something else. That's okay. Yeah, that's normal. Well, in dreams, it is normal. And it would be impossible to happen in Jagrat consciousness. But in Svapna consciousness, since everything is virtual and everything is illuminated only by the self, anything is possible. So the Shruti is compassionate to the human beings who are lost, who identify with matter, who think that Jagrat is the only consciousness. Usually when people say consciousness, they mean Jagrat consciousness. And sleeping, dreaming, deep sleep, and so on are considered some kind of unconsciousness. But no, that's not the case. It simply is a non-Jagrat consciousness. A different kind of consciousness with a different object. In dreams, the object is the mind, and the senses are dormant. And of course, in deep sleep, Suṣupti, there are no objects. That's the void, the great emptiness. And we'll come to analyze that too in good time. So let's go on. They say, do not wake him up suddenly. There is also a popular belief that proves the self to be distinct from the body and organs in dreams. What is that? Physicians and others say, do not wake up a sleeping man suddenly or violently. They say so only because they see that in dreams the self goes out of the body of the waking state through the gates of the organs and remains isolated outside. They also see the possibility of harm in this. That is, that if the self is violently roused, it may not find those gates of the organs. This is expressed as follows. If he does not find the right organ, the body becomes difficult to doctor. The self may not get back to those gates of the organs through which it went out, taking the shining functions of the latter. Or it may misplace those functions. In that case, defects such as blindness and deafness may result, and the body may find it difficult to treat them. Therefore, from the above popular notion also we can understand the self-luminosity of the Atman in dreams. In dreams, the self apparently leaves the body. I say apparently because actually the self does not move. It never changes. But what changes is the relation of the bodily organs with the self. They become disconnected. So in sleep, this is also sometimes called astral projection or out-of-body experience, OOB. And that means we are not anymore directly connected with the senses, but what we are seeing are only the images present in the mind. So that's all right. But if one is woken up suddenly or violently, one can miss the connections with the organs and wind up in some kind of in-between state. For example, sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is when you wake up and you can't move the body. Well, what happened is somehow or other, you missed the connection with the organs of movement and so on. And you may be aware of the body, but you have no control over it. This can sometimes happen due to the influence of ghosts, or if someone is woken up violently. So this kind of paralysis, if not easily treated by mantra and so on, can become chronic. It's actually a danger. So we should always wake up nice and slowly, not try to force ourselves awake, because that can lead to all kinds of problems. Being identified with dreams, the self transcends the forms of death. Therefore, in dreams, it is itself the light. Others, however, say that the dream state of a man is nothing but the waking state, that the dream state, which is the junction between this world and the next, is not a state distinct from either of them, but is identical with this world, that is, the waking state. Supposing this is so, what follows from this? Listen, if the dream state is nothing but the waking state, the self is not dissociated from the body and organs, but rather mixed up with them. Hence, the self is not itself the light. So in order to refute the self-luminosity of the Atman, these people say that the dream state is identical with the waking state. And they state their reason for taking it as the waking state because a man sees in dreams only those things, elephants, etc., that he sees in the waking state. All this is wrong, because then the organs are at rest. One dreams only when the organs have ceased to function. Therefore, no other light than the self can exist in that state. This has been expressed by the words, "There are no chariots nor animals," etc., in verse 10. Therefore, in the dream state, the man himself undoubtedly becomes the light. Because there is no other light. There's nothing else there. Why? Because he's dissociated from the body. If he was mixed up with the body, if the self was part of the body, not separate from it, even though sometimes located within it, then in dreams, the images of the senses, the inputs of the senses would still be there. But that's not the case. Only the impressions or memories of things seen in the world in waking state are present in dreams. One cannot dream of that which one has not experienced. And there's one big exception to that: when you have spiritual dreams. When you have spiritual dreams, which are a message from God or Goddess, then you can experience things beyond your previous experience. But these are rare, and they only happen to people who are properly prepared. And what is that preparation? Devotion. The cultivation of love for the god or goddess, the deity. So we're talking about a state here where in normal situations of dreams, the self is the only light. There is no other object except the self in dreams because one is dissociated from the senses. So there is no other light, no sun, no moon, no electricity, etc. This is described in scriptures, in Bhagavad Gita. That Krishna talks about the spiritual world as being someplace where there's no need for sun, moon, lamps, electricity, etc. That the only light is the light of the self. And this is already present in dreams. So that's why we say that bhakti is the yoga of the dream state. Bhakti is the yoga of the creation of basically imaginary forms, thought forms of gods and goddesses and heavenly realms and so forth. These forms are imaginary in the same sense as a dream is imaginary. And in these realms created by dreams, then we can experience things that compensate for the lacks and failures in our own lives, the circumstances that we're born into and that we have to exist in that really don't meet our needs, that aren't adequate or aren't good for us. So in these states, we can go beyond the conditionings of the material nature and experience things that make us whole, that heal, especially the emotional body, and make us become whole. What was stated at the beginning of this section, that it is through the light of the self that he sits, etc., in verse 6, has been proved in the dream state by a reference to the experiences of that state in the passage, "In this state the man, self, himself, becomes the light," in verse 9. But regarding the statement, being identified with dreams, it transcends this world, the forms of death, ignorance, etc., in verse 7. It is contended that the self transcends merely the forms of death, not death itself. We see it plainly in dreams that although the self is separated from the body and organs, it experiences joy, fear, etc. Therefore, it certainly does not transcend death, for we see the effects of death, that is, work, such as joy and fear at the time. If it is naturally handicapped by death, then it cannot attain liberation, for nobody can part with his nature. If, however, death is not the nature of the self, then liberation from it will be possible. In order to show that death is not the natural characteristic of the self, Yaññavalkya, already prompted by Janaka with the words, "Please instruct me further about liberation," sets himself to this task. And we'll see what he has to say in the next verse. But this is a very salient argument that, well, the self in dreams can experience all kinds of emotions. So it is not therefore free from death. But this is not correct, because the self clearly in a dream state transcends the body and senses, because it is the only light. If it is the only light, that means that actually the self is in control of dreams. The dreams are happening in the mind, which is an object of consciousness. The subject, the dreamer, the self, is free from those things. Emotions such as fear, anger, joy, etc., and different other kinds of feelings only occur in the mind, only in the object, not in the subject. The self is forever changeless. Because, how is that? It is only aware of awareness. The self is only aware of being aware. And the different objects of consciousness belong to those states only. And when the self withdraws from those states in turiya, then there's no more joy, fear, love, hate, attachment, aversion, etc. All those states are part of the objects of consciousness, not the subject, which is the self. Because the self is transcendental. It does not participate in those changes. It is only aware of them. So anything can happen in the world, in the mind, in the body, but that does not affect the self. The self is self-supporting. It does not rely or need anything else. So even if the whole world is destroyed, like at the end of the creation in the Mahapralaya, the self is unaffected. It simply doesn't matter. And this is why Lord Shiva, who represents the Nirguna Brahman, the superior Brahman, is always pictured as being in deep meditation, that he's completely detached. He on one level doesn't care what happens in the world. But on the other side, when he is awake and active, he acts out of compassion for the well-being of the illusory, but real to them, beings of this world. How? By speaking so many wonderful scriptures and by his different adventures with the demigods in the subtle world, supporting them and teaching them. There are many instances that we narrated in the Shiva Purana series. So when the Brahman becomes Lord Shiva, he voluntarily takes responsibility for the creation, even though he doesn't actually make the creation. Maya does that. The Saguna Brahman, the subsidiary or secondary or inferior Brahman. The superior Brahman and the inferior Brahman are one in their essence. Inconceivable, immeasurable, unchangeable, absolute, and so forth. Yet, there's a definite distinction in their functions, because the Nirguna Brahman simply is, never really does anything. And the Saguna Brahman then is everything that appears to exist. Maya, the temporary forms of the manifested creation. And when that creation is wound up at the end, and Shiva does his Tandava dance and it destroys everything, they merge back together and enter a quiescent state for a measureless interval of time. And then the creation begins again. It's just like breathing. It's described that Mahavishnu, lying on the ocean of milk, the causal ocean, when he breathes out, the whole universe manifests. And then when he breathes in, it disappears. And these are the days and nights of Brahma. Each day, each night lasts something like 300 billion years. And at the end of the day, the whole creation, or the secondary creation, is destroyed. And then at the dawn, the next day, it's recreated again. Now, during this time, the superior heaven, the pure creation, remains as it is without any disturbance. From Brahmaloka on up. And so that's our goal, or that's our minimum goal. If we can't realize Brahman in this lifetime, at least through worship of God and Goddess, we can attain the pure creation in the next life. And so this is why Śaṅkarācārya and other great teachers, along with describing Brahman, also give the process of bhakti, worship of God and Goddess in form, because that can lead to a world where one is effectively immortal. In other words, existent for the entire duration of the creation. So if we can't realize Brahman in this life, that becomes our secondary goal. Aum Tat Sat. Aum Shakti Aum. Aum Namah Shivaya.